Hi, good evening to all. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we shall discuss a new topic of microeconomics, that is consumer behavior. So first of all, we have to understand what is the meaning of consumer. Who is a consumer? So consumer, it means a consuming unit. It means a consuming unit. The unit may be one or more than one person in a family. तो कंज्यूमर किसको हम बोलते हैं? जो गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज कंज्यूम करता है, उसी यूनिट को हम बोलते हैं कंज्यूमर. वो एक पर्सन हो सकता है, मोर देन वन पर्सन हो सकता है इन द फैमिली. नेक्स्ट कम टू कंजम्पशन. व्हाट इज कंजम्पशन? इट मीन्स satisfaction of human wants with the help of goods and services. Consumption means satisfaction of human wants by means of goods and services. As you know, production is the creation of utility, but consumption is the destruction of utility. कोई सा भी चीज जब प्रोड्यूस होता है, इसका मतलब क्या होता है? यूटिलिटी तैयार होता है, क्रिएट होता है. और हम जब कोई सा चीज को कंज्यूम कर लेते हैं, नो डाउट वी गेट सेटिस्फेक्शन, हमको सेटिस्फेक्शन मिलेगा, बट हम उसी कमोडिटी का यूटिलिटी को खत्म कर देते हैं. एक चॉकलेट खाने के बाद हमको सेटिस्फेक्शन मिलेगा, बट हम क्या किए? जब एक चॉकलेट खा लिए, उसका जितना यूटिलिटी था उसको हम खत्म कर दिए. देयरफॉर कंजम्पशन इज द डिस्ट्रक्शन ऑफ यूटिलिटी. नाउ वी मूव ऑन टू स्टडी one of the most important law of consumption, that is law of diminishing marginal utility, or in short form we can call it DMU, diminishing marginal utility. So this is the most basic law of consumption. This is very easy to understand. So now we shall start the law of diminishing marginal utility. The law of diminishing marginal utility states that when a consumer consumes more and more units of a commodity continuously, the marginal utility of it for him goes on diminishing. So what our law of DMU says? When a consumer consumes more and more units of a commodity, the marginal utility of it means commodity, for the consumer will go on diminishing. इसका मतलब क्या होता है? यदि एक कंज्यूमर एक कमोडिटी को बार बार निरंतर खाते जाएगा, कंटिन्यूअसली खाते जाएगा, तो क्या होगा? मार्जिनल यूटिलिटी, उसी चीज का, वही कमोडिटी का मार्जिनल यूटिलिटी उसी कंज्यूमर के लिए धीरे 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 क्या होते जाएगा? कम होते जाएगा. दिस इज द यूनिवर्सल बिहेवियर ऑफ द कंज्यूमर. यू नो दैट हम अगर कोई सा भी गुड्स को या कमोडिटी को कंटिन्यूअसली खाते जाते हैं तो क्या होता है? धीरे 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 हमको उसी कमोडिटी से कम 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 यूटिलिटी मिलेगा. Therefore, basing on this principle, universal behavior of the consumer, this law is incorporated in economics. Once again, I tell you, this law of DMU has been derived from one of the characteristics of human wants. What is that? That is, a particular want is limited and satiable. Though all wants are unlimited, but a particular want is limited and satiable, that I have taught to you in the previous videos. So, this law has been derived from that particular human want. What is that? A particular want is limited and satiable. So, once again I repeat, the law of diminishing marginal utility states that when a consumer consumes more and more units of a commodity continuously, then the marginal utility of it for him goes on diminishing. Now we can explain this law with the help of a arithmetic table and a diagram. So I have here given for you the arithmetic table. Suppose our consumer is consuming units of chocolates. I have taken up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Marginal utility, you know that utility is subjective, cannot be measured accurately. So I have taken an imaginary unit of marginal utility and total utility, that is utils. Marginal utility are 10, 8, 6, 4, 2, 0 and -2 respectively from units of chocolate consumption from 1 to 7 units. So in this way we get the total utility of 10, 18, 24, 28, 30, 30 and 28. So when the consumer consumes first unit of chocolate, both marginal utility and total utility are same, that is 10 utils. When he consumes second unit, marginal utility decreases to 8, but total utility increases to 18. Why? This 8 is added to the 10 and total utility becomes 18. In this way, if he consumes third unit of chocolates, marginal utility again decreases to 6 and total utility increases to 24 because 6 has been added in the total utility of 18 and it becomes 24 in this way. When he consumed 6 units of chocolates, marginal utility is 0. That means at this point he will refuse to take further chocolates. So here where marginal utility is 0, then total utility becomes maximum, that is 30. Now beyond this point, if the consumer consumes 7 units of utility, then 7 units of chocolates, then marginal utility becomes negative and total utility decreases from 30 to 28 because minus 2 is added to 30, so it becomes 28. So this table clearly shows that when our consumer consumes units of chocolates continuously from 1 unit to 6 unit, marginal utility for him goes on diminishing, that is 10, 8, 6, 4, 2 and 0. So this is nothing but law of diminishing marginal utility. Now we can explain the law of DMU with the help of a diagram which I have drawn in this board. You can very well see it and understand it. So in x-axis we have taken out units of chocolate. That means x-axis or x-axis measures units of chocolates and y-axis measures marginal utility of chocolates. So our consumer is consuming 7 units of chocolate, that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7, and he derives the marginal utilities of 10, 8, 6, 4, 2, 0, and in the last 7th unit it is marginal utility is negative. So if we shall go on plotting different points between units of chocolates and marginal utility of chocolates, then we shall get a diagram. In the first unit of consumption of chocolate, marginal utility is 10. You can see this point. In the second unit, marginal utility becomes 8, decreases to 8. In the third unit, marginal utility again decreases to 6. In the fourth unit, marginal utility becomes 4. In the fifth unit, marginal utility again decreases to 2. And in the sixth unit of the consumption of the chocolate, marginal utility becomes 0. You can see this point. And in the 7th unit of the consumption of the chocolate, marginal utility is minus 2. So if we join all these points, we shall get marginal utility curve, and you can very well see that A, B and C, A, B, C is the marginal utility curve for chocolates of the consumer. So how does it look like? It slopes downward. A, B, C is the marginal utility curve which slopes downward from left to right. Why it slopes downward? Because as the consumer consumes more and more units of chocolates, वो जब more and more chocolate खाएगा तो marginal utility of the chocolate for him क्या होते जाएगा? Goes on diminishing, कम होते जाएगा. तो ये एक चीज याद रखो, मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट थिंग, अगर किसी भी दो वेरिएबल के बीच रिलेशन अगर इनवर्स रहेगा, इनडायरेक्ट रहेगा, तो हमेशा आवर कर्व will be downward sloping to the right. Here देखो, कंज्यूमर ज्यादा से ज्यादा कमोडिटी, मोर एंड मोर यूनिट्स चॉकलेट खाएगा 1 से 7 तक, तो मार्जिनल यूटिलिटी क्या होते जाएगा? कम 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 होते जाएगा. तो व्हेन ही consumes more and more units of chocolates, marginal utility becomes less and less. That means there is inverse relationship between units of chocolates and marginal utility. Therefore, our marginal utility curve slopes downward from left to right. Now, question arises, why does marginal utility decrease when the units of commodity increases? So this is a natural question. Why our marginal utility decreases when we consume more and more units of a commodity? There are two reasons for it. The first reason being the intensity of desire for the commodity decreases. When a consumer consumes more and more units of a commodity, his intensity of desire, इच्छा का जो डिग्री होता है, वो धीरे धीरे क्या होते जाएगा? कम होते जाएगा. Therefore, when he consumes more and more units of a commodity, his intensity for that intensity of desire for that commodity for him go on diminishing, so marginal utility of the commodity goes on falling. And second, commodities are not perfect substitutes of each other. It is another important or interesting reason. What is that? Commodities are not perfect substitute of each other. In our example, our consumer is consuming what? Chocolate. If chocolate can be substituted for everything, for example, AC, car, books, dresses, etc., etc., then what would happen? If there is perfect substitution of the chocolate, चॉकलेट का पूरा परफेक्ट सब्स्टिट्यूट है, माने एक चॉकलेट के बदले वो ड्रेस खरीद सकता है, और एक चॉकलेट के बदले वो एसी ला सकता है, और एक चॉकलेट के बाद वो लैपटॉप ला सकता है, और एक चॉकलेट के बदले क्या ला सकता है? मोबाइल फोन ला सकता है। तो क्या होगा? मान लो फर्स्ट यूनिट ऑफ चॉकलेट वो कंज्यूम कर लिया, सेकेंड यूनिट चॉकलेट वो क्या किया? मोबाइल फोन दुकान को गया, एक चॉकलेट पकड़ा दिया, उसके बदले क्या एक ले आया? मोबाइल फोन ले आया। तो ये कब होगा? इफ देयर इज परफेक्ट सब्स्टिट्यूशन ऑफ चॉकलेट्स। तो ऐसे होने से क्या होगा? मार्जिनल यूटिलिटी ऑफ चॉकलेट फॉर हिम instead of decreasing it will go on increasing। थर्ड यूनिट में क्या? मान लो थर्ड यूनिट चॉकलेट लेके गया, एक ड्रेस शॉप को गया और एक चॉकलेट पकड़ा दिया, उसके बदले क्या ले आया? एक ड्रेस ले आया। तो हियर ऑल्सो द मार्जिनल यूटिलिटी ऑफ चॉकलेट विल इंक्रीज। तो ऐसा पॉसिबल है क्या? It is not at all possible because chocolate cannot substitute mobile phone, chocolate cannot substitute dress, chocolate cannot substitute AC, etc., etc. Because commodities are not perfect substitute of each other. Therefore, when he consumes more and more units of chocolate continuously, marginal utility of chocolates for him goes on diminishing. Are you clear about the law of diminishing marginal utility? Of course, the law is based on certain conditions or certain assumptions. So every law is based on certain assumptions or certain conjunctions. So we shall now study in detail the assumptions of the law of diminishing marginal utility. If these assumptions hold good, then only the law of DMU will operate, otherwise not. ये अगर सब काम करेगा तब जाके आवर लॉ ऑफ डिमिनिशिंग मार्जिनल यूटिलिटी काम करेगा, नहीं तो नहीं। तो व्हाट आर द assumptions ऑफ द लॉ ऑफ डिमिनिशिंग मार्जिनल यूटिलिटी? तो फर्स्ट वन इज commodity must be homogeneous. Commodity must be homogeneous. Homogeneous का मतलब similar. The units of a commodity that our consumer consumes must be similar in quality, quantity, size, design, packing, and color. In every respect, all units of the commodity for him must be similar. Then only in the additional consumption of the commodity he will get less and less of utility, and marginal utility will go on diminishing. Take for example, suppose I told you homogeneous, that means quality, quantity, everything must remain same. Suppose he first takes a sweet chocolate, in the second unit he takes a sour chocolate. Now quality has been changed. So it may so happen that after taking sweet chocolate, if we take sour chocolate, marginal utility, instead of increasing, it will go on decreasing. Therefore, quality, quantity, size, design, packing, color, everything must remain same. Then only our law of DMU will operate. Second, consumption must be continuous. This is another most important assumptions. There must be continuous consumption, एक के बाद एक. हम अगर बोलेंगे और चैलेंज लगाएंगे किसी के साथ तो 1 किलो मीठा खा सकता है क्या? सामने वाला वाला हाँ मैं खा सकता हूँ. कैसे? मैं सुबह खाऊंगा, दोपहर को एक खाऊंगा, रात को एक खाऊंगा, फिर ऐसे करते खा के रखूंगा. तो ये क्या हुआ? There is a time gap between the consumption of the units of the sweets. So if there is time gap, marginal utility will not diminish. एक सुबह खाया, एक दोपहर को खाया, एक रात को खाया, तो मार्जिनल यूटिलिटी क्यों डिमिनिश करेगा? क्योंकि टाइम गैप हो गया. उसका इंटेंसिटी ऑफ डिजायर फॉर द स्वीट्स will not decrease, rather it will increase. Therefore, consumption must be continuous. Third one is taste, fashion, habit, income of the consumer should not change during the period of consumption. Taste, fashion, habit and income of the consumer should remain the same during the period of consumption. For example, habit. If the habit of the consumer changes, marginal utility of different commodities, marginal utility instead of decreasing, it may increase in the additional consumption of the commodity. For example, if a non-smoker becomes a smoker, एक लड़का था वो सिगरेट कभी नहीं पीता था लेकिन सिगरेट पीने का स्टार्ट कर दिया, तो उसको क्या होगा? जब सिगरेट पिएगा बहुत अच्छा लगेगा, तो 1, 2, 3 जब सिगरेट पीते जाएगा, मार्जिनल यूटिलिटी उसके लिए क्या होगा? कमने के बजाय क्या होगा? वो बढ़ते जाएगा, क्योंकि he has newly started smoking cigarettes. और जो रेगुलर कस्टमर है उसका मार्जिनल यूटिलिटी एडिशनल यूनिट में क्या होते जाएगा? डिमिनिश होते जाएगा. तो इसीलिए टेस्ट चेंज नहीं होना चाहिए, फैशन चेंज नहीं होना चाहिए, हैबिट चेंज नहीं होना चाहिए, इनकम चेंज नहीं होना चाहिए. अगर ये सब सारे चेंज हो जाएंगे तो वी मे नॉट गेट लॉ ऑफ डिमिनिशिंग मार्जिनल यूटिलिटी. कंज्यूमर मस्ट बी नॉर्मल और रैशनल. कंज्यूमर मस्ट बी नॉर्मल और रैशनल इन कंज्यूमिंग ए कमोडिटी. हिज mental condition of the consumer should not change. He must be rational. His mental condition must be sound while consuming. If there is a drunkard, if there is a madman, for them law of DMU does not operate. If there is a drunkard, ड्रंकार्ड जानते हो? A drunkard always want to take more and more wine. जब तक उसको होश है, he will take more and more and more wine. ये दिल मांगे मोर. So, for him, marginal utility of wine will go on increasing because he is not normal. So, our consumer must be normal or rational for the operation of law of DMU. Price of the commodity should not change during the period of consumption. तो प्राइस हमारा कंज्यूमर जो कमोडिटी कंज्यूम करता है उसका प्राइस कंजम्पशन पीरियड में चेंज नहीं होना चाहिए. अगर चेंज हो गया, marginal utility in the additional unit of consumption may not decrease. And 6 is marginal utility of money. Marginal utility of money must remain constant. मनी का मार्जिनल यूटिलिटी चेंज नहीं होना चाहिए. अगर चेंज हो जाएगा, किसी को ज्यादा मिलेगा, किसी को कम मार्जिनल यूटिलिटी मिलेगा. सो इन द एडिशनल यूनिट मार्जिनल यूटिलिटी may increase or may decrease. So for the operation of law of diminishing marginal utility, marginal utility of money remains constant. And last one is that utility can be measured. I told you in the earlier classes, utility is subjective, cannot be measured, but for the operation of the law, we have to assume that utility can be measured in terms of imaginary units like utils. Then only we can measure total utility, marginal utility, otherwise not. Therefore, we have to assume that utility can be measured for the operation of the law of diminishing marginal utility. So, if these things hold good, if these things, these assumptions will work out, then only the law of diminishing marginal utility will be operative, otherwise not. Thank you all. This much for today. We shall continue in the next class.